Hello and welcome to GreenFleet Talks. My name is Kate Armitage and I'm your host for our discussion today, and I'm delighted to be joined by Mark Pym, Managing Director at Charged EV. Hi Mark.
Hi Kate, how are you?
I'm very well, thank you, and thank you for joining us on what I believe is your first GreenFleet Talks.
It is, yeah. No, thank you.
Welcome. Now, I've had a quick look at Charged EV. Now, you're boasting over 50,000 charge point installations across both domestic and workplace, which is a fabulous number, so congratulations. But I see that you also offer solar PV installations. Is this a trend that you're seeing increase, that more drivers want renewable energy?
Yeah, definitely. Over the years, it's something that we've seen increase more and more. We've more recently got into the solar PV installation side of the business. But absolutely, that's been driven by consumer demand. Customers are either engaged in already looking for this, or advising us at the point of installation that they're considering it in the next steps.
Yeah, brilliant. And long may it last. I'd like to see a lot more. Mark, today we're going to be discussing SMEs and all the things that they need to consider when they are looking to switch to zero-emission vehicles. So I'm going to start the conversation talking about the delay to the end of sales date for new petrol and diesel vehicles being pushed back to 2035. And whilst that may have come as a relief to some SMEs, do you anticipate that there may be any risks to that delay?
No, I don't think so. I think for myself, what we have seen is the majority of the business that was already engaged in the process with ourselves, and probably many of our businesses like ourselves, are still in that process. It's not changed their thinking. I think there'll be a small amount of businesses at the back end that will have been able to perhaps extend an additional cycle into their vehicles, into their fleets. But generally, what we've seen is the ball has carried on rolling. Businesses are still looking to drive the transition forwards. We've not really seen any slowdown of inquiries. We've not seen any delayed decision making. And fundamentally, I think the business case for EVs and the transition to electric vehicles and is played its part in itself. We're not really seeing any drastic changes.
Great. Okay. Well, that's really, really positive to hear. Cost and lack of time and lack of knowledge are often cited by SMEs as a reason for why they haven't begun that fleet electrification process. What advice would you give them?
Obviously, every SME is going to have a different case that they have to, or a different business case that they're going to have to build. Could it be costly depending on a few different factors? Yes. But in terms of the lack of knowledge, there's plenty of support out there. Many businesses like ourselves will provide additional consultancy services above and beyond just the sort of products that we install. So we can help and guide where necessary. And if we don't have the right answers, we can point people in the right direction. What I've found in the industry, and certainly as our business operates, is we all have the same end goal in mind. So we want to make sure that the customers and the fleets and the representatives of fleets and the stakeholders are heading in the right direction. I think one of the worst things that we can all do is try and drive people there quicker if they're not ready to go in that direction, and we're not quite hitting any of the key decision points that they need. We'll end up creating detractors before we'll create sort of positive influences into the space. So it's not as big and scary as it may look and feel at times, but there's definitely support out there.
Yeah, well, I think that's definitely true. And you can go for something relatively simplistic rather than having this all singing or dancing ecosystem. So on that topic then, if you're an SME, or if I'm an SME that's about to start that electrification journey, what are the kind of basic steps that I should be following?
Again, every SME is going to be different. But I think for me, if you're talking about if you're a fleet that's got lots of data, lots of information out there, there's many partners that you can go and speak to and will support with analysing that to truly understand. What we find is that most SMEs don't have that. And my guidance there is try some pilot projects target the 10, 15, 20% of your fleet that could be the easiest to transition. Put in place some real key important success markers so you understand what success looks like for those. And then trial, iterate, develop that plan and that strategy going forwards. Don't start with the most challenging of vehicles or the most challenging of drivers. Really just aim for that simple vehicles first and take it from there.
Yeah, and get all the important learnings, and then you can essentially ratify your business case, can't you? So any of the assumptions that you've made around the running costs of the vehicle or the running costs of the charging hardware, you can, approve all of that before you then roll out to the rest of your fleet.
Yeah, there's more often than not we see where some of these pilot projects not necessarily fail, but don't quite achieve what the people running them wanted them to achieve. Is where the assumptions in the front end were not quite right. So as much as you can do to test and iterate those is the better.
Yeah.
The thing that we always find is don't rely on, especially as part of those pilot projects, don't rely on tech. People, the drivers, the people around them will be the things that actually make it fail rather than the electric vehicles themselves. Having a really good set of infrastructure, a good set of management tools and tech in the background is great, but you've got to get the policies and you've got to get the practices embedded into your teams as well. Otherwise, things will start falling down around you. And it's very difficult to pick that back up and bring people back on board if they've seen that something's starting to fail. So definitely put lots of time and focus into bringing the people on board.
I couldn't agree with you more. And as you said, Mark, choose your people wisely for your pilot project, because you're going to have some people who are real advocates. And if you can get them engaged, then you're going to have all the building blocks for success. Whereas if you flip it the other way, if you've got a vehicle that hasn't charged overnight for whatever reason, that could have, quite big consequences for that driver in the morning.
Yeah, I think some of the most successful projects we've been involved in, there's definitely been an element of introducing champions into the mix, getting them on board, getting them working, not just involved from when you're running it out there, but actually bring some people in that are going to be using the EVs really early on into the journey.
Yeah.
Help get them to making decisions. But then a couple of the really successful projects where they've also found who are going to be the biggest detractors in the business and get them into the journey as well sooner. So you can at least see and hear and feel the type of things that they're going to be saying or people like them are likely to say. And you can start chipping away at that a little bit earlier as well and making sure you're answering those questions earlier on.
And it's a very, very good point, because, I've heard people say many times that once you've been in an EV, once you've driven an EV, and the majority of people don't want to go back. So it is a great way of, converting the cynics, for want of a better phrase.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So aside from zero emission vehicles, there are other ways that SMEs can reduce emissions from their transport operations. Have you got any ideas on that?
Optimizing the use of vehicles generally across, whether you're a business, whether you're an individual, reducing as much transport as possible is going to have a major impact. So optimization of routes, depending on whether you're a courier, for example, is going to be huge. Ensuring you've got really competent, robust telematic solutions that can help and support with that and bring data is going to be really key. And then there's a whole range of alternatives that are sort of in the mix around alternative fuels and different things, but definitely some of the key drivers that we see is really electrifying the small vehicles that can be, and then you can start challenging some of the bigger, more challenging vehicles later down the line.
That's great advice. Yes, start with the smaller, easy to electrify vehicles, and then you could consider alternative fuels if you've got larger vehicles or vehicles that are doing particularly high mileage. Particularly the HVO seems to be extremely popular. So, yeah, it's a big puzzle, isn't it? And you've got to fit it all together.
Absolutely, I think creating that ecosystem, starting off with a real understanding of what you want to achieve and why. What is the key drivers? Is it a project? If it's someone that's really looking for the financial benefits of it, will be different to someone that's really keen for some challenges, some ESG criteria. So understanding the what's and whys you're wanting to do this, and what the key success markers, and setting short-term, sort of intermediate goals that you can iterate on and develop over time is going to be really a key to success for me.
Yeah, well, Mark, you've obviously got a huge amount of experience in this space. I would say to our viewers, if you do need to speak to someone who is expert about EV charging infrastructure, then contact Charged EV.
Yeah, thank you.
Great. Thank you very much for joining us, Mark. That is about all we've got time for. Thank you for watching. Please tune to GF365 again soon.
Thank you.